Good morning. It's Tuesday and the 5th day of April 2021. 2022 almost took you back to 2021. But apparently, when you look at what is actually coming in from the world of business, a lot is out there. For the Muslim community, you could easily tell that during the evening time, it is actually a busy when it comes to business, most probably because most of the Muslims are actually breaking their fast during that time. That is between 7 to around 10 in the night, 10 p.m. So clearly, when you're to look at most of the things, as business is actually still moving on as well, we will be giving you all details and all the updates. We are in the holy month, and the holy month also entails that we always have to keep holy and try to follow up on situations that come and happen in one way or the other. I am Joram Paul Sonko. This is Smart Means Business. We are your morning kickstarter, ensuring that we take you through what is coming in from the world of business and giving you all the details that matter, speaking business and more and more. Well, as a matter of fact, when you look at some of the key highlights that we do have for you in today's show, we'll be looking at national budget for the financial year 2022-2023, where the MPs have given their side of the 47 trillion budget that is expected to be presented in June. Well, and also we shall be looking at the SMB across borders, looking at business stories and reports that are making headlines across the business world. Further yet, we will be also looking at medicine business as our eyes turn to alternative medicine. Well, besides that, we shall be having the weather updates, but also we shall also take a look at what is coming in from travel photography, where we'll be having it as our topical discussion, sitting down with one of the travel photographers who has actually made his name from that particular angle to understand how best or how far has it shaped the domestic tourism sector of Uganda. Not only domestic tourism, but how has it shaped the entire tourism of this country. And when you look at the ongoing situations, we shall be analyzing most of those in today's. Well, when we are to look back slowly at some of the events that have been happening in March, you can only imagine that a lot of business has been happening. Well, besides the fact that the prices have actually been escalating highly, you would only wish that by the end of April, most of the prices will go low. But as of now, not very many prices are actually decreasing. What we do know so far is that most of them are still steadily at the same amount where they were at previously. When you look at the fuel prices, and actually fuel is actually shooting up in some of the areas with a difference of around 50 shillings. And some petrol stations now having it at around 5,260, the others having it at 5,190. So you can easily see that was a fuel price that had actually decreased to 4,900, now shooting up to almost 5,300. But as well, when you look at the sugar prices, a bar of soap, look at cooking oil, most of those prices are still high in most of the areas as well. And when you look at the level of, I think, a number of prices that are not increasing are the ones that are the alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. Those are prices that are still stable. Only in, let's say, in leisure places, that is where most of these prices are hiked a little bit. Reason being that the demand is low and yet the supply is quite a lot. And in most cases, because very few people tend to actually go and buy from these places. So the owners, to beat up the rent and all that, you've all got into that situation whereby these particular prices are definitely high. Well, speaking of the SMB reports, as we're going to kickstart off our today's show, we're going to look at the national budget for the financial year 2022-2023. Now, apparently, half of the budget consists of debts, and the Ministry of Finance tabled the final budget framework paper for the financial year 2022-2023 to Parliament, and this estimates around 47 trillion shillings, which is hoped to transform the country into a money economy. 1 trillion shillings has so far been allocated to the Parish development model, and the Parliamentary Committee, Budget Committee will scrutinize the annual budget estimates. We spoke to some members of Parliament, and they had their say on this particular budget. Take a look.
The Public Finance Management Act requires the Minister of Finance to present the annual budget estimate for the preceding year, and Honorable Amos Lugolobi, the State Minister of Finance, tabled a 47.2 trillion shillings budget on the floor of Parliament. But lawmakers still think that Uganda as a country has not yet reached that point of raising such revenue, yet we are from COVID-19 effect.
I want to inform Ugandans that as a country, considering to our GDP, that money we are anticipating, it is more of a dream. But there is the way how the government wants to show Ugandans that it cares and it has the biggest budget. Why am I saying we are not even going to be there? One, we are affected by COVID, and 2 weeks back, I remember the minister brought a supplementary bill wanting to borrow 2.1 trillion shillings domestic borrowing to run our budget. So that one tells you that honestly, apart from feeding in those figures for Ugandans to think that we've grown economically, we are progressing well, I don't think we shall be there.
Honorable Muhindo Aaron Tony says if such budgets don't give much priority to important sectors like agriculture, there is still issues with raising the budget.
The allocation of agriculture is expected to be up to at least 15%. Unfortunately, every year, the allocation for agriculture, which we know is the backbone, goes on dwindling. And there is no deliberate concern to see what happens to uplift the income that the local person gets from the allocation of agriculture.
According to Honorable Ekanyi Geoffrey, Member of Parliament, Tororo County thinks having such a budget would not be the issue, but the borrowing that supports such budgets should do what it's supposed to do.
Our debt to GDP now is at 52%. The government lifted the cap from 51 to move to 52 in order to finance the budget of 2020 to 2023. But borrowing alone is not bad. All governments in the world borrow, including individuals. The challenge or the problem comes how we use the money. In Uganda, as you are aware, there is a lot of leakage, inflating of costs. For example, a road that would be done ordinarily at a cost of, for purpose of this discussion, would be done at 100 million Uganda shillings, will be done at 180, 200 million shillings. And yet even the lifespan of the road is short. So there is serious leakage in the infrastructure shade. Compensation for the infrastructure corridor is inflated. People are compensated for value of land and property, which is not according to the market rate. So consultants' costs are inflated. So that is where the leakage is, and that's where the mismanagement is.
Honorable Ekenya further says the 2022-2023 budget consists of the debts, and half of it will be going to the country's debts.
The budget of 2022-2023 of 47 trillion shillings. Greater percent of that budget, about a half and more, is for clearing the debt. So what is available for real investment and for use, it's not more than 10 trillion. The other percentage goes to handling salary and wages, clearing domestic debt, then the discretionary expenditure, like for parish development model, for doing roads, for doing water, hospitals, and so forth. It's not more than 10 trillion shillings. But our budgeting framework is that all the expenses for the year must be captured, including debts, within the budget. So we are going to analyze it and look at it, and then at the right time give you the right figures.
In the financial year 2021 to 2022, the budget was 44 trillion shillings, and now the 2022-2023 financial year budget is 47.2 trillion shillings. This shows that there is an increase of 3 trillion shillings.
Okay. very huge increase there from the budget. The members of parliament have their argument saying that the budget is clearing more of the debts, and we expect a lot of borrowing throughout the situation. Borrowing has never been a challenge, clearly, if you're to look at this. Why do we say so? It has never been a challenge because if you borrow for a good cause, just like the entire country borrowing for a good cause, it is definitely not problematic at all. But the only challenge that where most of our policy makers get it wrong is that some of them apparently borrow for things that do not matter, and they end up using money wrongly, or they end up dispersing these public funds, or let's say public funds wrongly, or putting them in other different projects, not the ones that were intended to actually receive the funds. But at the end of the day, you would see that the domestic debt is increasing day in, day out. And most of the MPs also have this worry that when you look at the domestic debt increasing, then it will actually limit more borrowing, because even the commercial banks will actually limit the amount of money they're giving out to government, or even the private sector, where the government also goes in to actually get some loans. So clearly, look at that. The increase in domestic debt is actually high. Increase in external loans is also high. So we are looking at a budget, and then at the end of the day, we are financing this particular budget. And before financing, we do not have enough money that can actually hit the 47 trillion. So when you try to look at the situations here, the parliament, this particular budget is actually estimated and is hoping to transform the country into a money economy. If you have to remember very well, we are into a year of economic recovery, and one of the key aspects that are going to be looked at is the economic recovery. And one of the key initiatives or programs that were put in place by government this very as we are heading into this very financial year is that we have the parish development model. And the parish development model is one which is actually looking at already 1 trillion has already been allocated to the parish development model. Here, when you look at the sum of money that is going to be dispersed, is 17 million per parish to help out in bringing most of the people from the grassroots, from the parish level. And still, when you look at that, 1 trillion already, that is already off going into that. Now we have almost a very huge amount of money that is actually going on to salary of the public servants. Now this includes the MPs, the ministers, this includes everyone who falls under any public office or any public service office. Those are salaries that are supposed to be allocated through the national budget. Now, better yet, still look at the situations whereby we also have to look at the different ministries that are allocated by the government. All those ministries are supposed to receive funds from security, health, labor and social development, tourism. All those ministries are supposed to be receiving a special amount of money. Not the same amount of money, but they are supposed to receive an amount of money. So when you look at this, and with the budget that is actually expected to transform the country into a money economy, bigger questions are still at hand, whereby most people or most of the MPs are still asking themselves quite bigger questions that, can we hit the 47 trillion shillings? Is there a moment where we can hit that in there? So when you look at the situation here, the Parliamentary Budget Committee is set to sit to scrutinize. This is supposed to happen before we hit May for the Parliamentary Budget Committee to scrutinize the annual budget estimates, to look at the allocated funds. Where are they allocated? Which sector is receiving which money? Which sector is supposed to receive this specific money? Which ministry has received more money than it's supposed to receive, or which ministry deserves an increment? So these are some of the things that the Parliamentary Budget Committee has to look through before that, because the Ministry of Finance tabled the final budget framework paper, and it is estimated that it will take 47 trillion Ugandan shillings for this year's annual budget, that is for the financial year 2022-2023. So when we look ahead, the question is always going back to how are we going to get this money? Are we getting back to the borrowing? Are we getting back to applying for more of the loans? Or do we have the money in place? Because turning this into a money economy, because at the end of the day, there's a very huge argument by most of the MPs, more so from the opposition side, who claim and say that clearly, before it turns into a money economy, the government needs to look into a situation whereby most of the taxpayers or the eligible taxpayers are people who are not making any profits anymore. People are actually carrying on business, but they're not earning anything from it. That is why we've seen most of the businesses collapsing and most of the entrepreneurs running out of the business. Why? Because the taxes are quite high. Look at the rent, then look at the cost of production. Now, if you put that all together, and then you actually have to get back on the drawing board to understand and evaluate yourself, this evaluation actually takes you back to a situation whereby you need to understand, let's say, your cost of production. What is your output? Let's look at your sales. How best are you making your money? Are you making the money that you've actually intended to make out of your business? Once you're not making, that is where you could definitely see, for an economy to become a money economy, which is what the government is hoping for, there are a lot of questions that need to be tackled. Look at the agricultural sector. And we all know the agriculture sector being a backbone of Uganda's economy. A lot of bigger questions are which is supposed to be addressed. The parish development model also looks to address some of these. But looking at the fact that we also have farmers that are still struggling ably and still struggling and trying to see that they stay afloat in agriculture. One, agriculture has become modern, and modern problems always need modern solutions. If you're dealing in a traditional setup in agriculture, when you're facing modern problems and you cannot access modern solutions, these are some of the challenges that farmers are facing. And these are some of the things that the government clearly has to take a look, because now we're having an increase of the national budget and the estimate hitting up to 47 trillion Ugandan shillings. That may not be the issue. The issue is, how best are we going to implement this? When you look at our policies, this has never been a lie, regardless of situations, that we are very good at policy making. Our policy makers are always on point. And speaking of them being on point, is we need to address some of the loopholes in there. Now, besides agriculture, if you have to also look at some of the sectors that that actually have a very huge question, look at the health sector. Many people do believe that the health sector has to be prioritized. We all understand that security is a very top-notch when it comes to the sector that is supposed to be prioritized, because without peace, business will never prevail. But look at the health. Health is supposed to be prioritized. And you would see in the last 2 years, a lot of money was actually heading to the health facilities. Reason being that we were actually in a pandemic, and the pandemic actually needed us to be in a recovery mode, or bet into what we could say, we were actually in an emergency situation, whereby any money that we got, we're supposed to make sure that we put, let's say, oxygen cylinders into these hospitals, getting in more equipment into hospitals. That's where you could actually see that more funding that was targeting hospitals was to help in the facilitation processes. But looking at the taxpayers are the ones that actually push for this particular money to get on board. Because without the taxpayers, then we'd absolutely have no money to make the budget allocations. And this is where it takes us back to what has government done to create room for these particular taxpayers, because the taxpayers are feeling the pinch day in, day out with the taxes and the revenues that is supposed to be collected from URA and the taxes that they are subjected to. But one would still say it is mandatory, right, for any business person to actually pay taxes, because it is lawful. And if something is by law, then people are supposed to abide by it. But in the long run, people always want to know, how am I benefiting from the money that I'm actually paid? Because if I'm paying the taxes, I in turn want to expect social services from the government. I want to expect something from the government. I want to expect the government to actually come to me and provide something in the long run so that I can see it. When you look at the money economy or the economic status in Uganda today, even when we want to look at Uganda's economy to turn it into a money economy, when you look at most of the people in Uganda today, most of them live below the dollar. And speaking of living below the dollar, people are living below 4,000. People don't earn more than 4,000 Ugandan shillings a day. The best someone earns on a daily is 10,000. And it's a situation whereby someone will opt to actually remain under salary than go for self-employment, because under self-employment you feel the pinch alone. You're feeling it. Under the salary situation, it is either you deliver and leave the salary payment to your boss, or once you fail, you're down. But when you look at the situation that most people are not actually earning more than $1 on a daily, people are just living for survival. The question goes back to, are we really ready for what we call the money economy? Bigger questions that need bigger answers. But we are looking at the budget framework and how the government is actually setting up all these plans. And we can all agree that it is something that we can give time. It is not just an immediate transition. It is something that is supposed to take processes. Remember, 2 years down the road, economies went backward to actually say, most of the economists say the economy went back a little over 5 years back. Not only 2 years, but in the 2 years, it's like we were pushed back 5 years. So that means for us to recover again, we need 5 steady years of consistent progress. And not only consistent securing of the future, but consistent progress. This year looks at economic recovery with inclusive growth. And inclusive growth entails almost every citizen of the country to take part in the action or take part in the economic recovery and economic process of the country. This time around, not only are you recovering your own self or your own business, but also helping the economy of the country recover, because as the cost of production happens and everything that happens, you know, it is all in the value chain. And this value chain leads us to one main goal, growth of the GDP. But when you look at the escalating prices here, a lot of issues are supposed to be addressed. And as we are actually heading out of the financial year, we're left with only a month and a half to actually say goodbye to the financial year 2021-2022. We shall sit down, try to evaluate what have we achieved back in the time. We will be doing an assessment for the sectors that are actually, when you look at the sectors that are very vital, looking at, let's say, the security sector, look at the health ministry, the Ministry of Works and Transport. A lot of ministries have actually come out to actually execute their duties. There are others that have also come out to say they need more funds allocated to them in this upcoming year. Reason being that every other financial year or every other national budget that is passed, most of them are definitely not given a lot of priority, or they're given less funds. To give a case study in the Ministry of Gender and Social Development, which actually covers women, people with disability. It also covers workers or employees plus employers. So you can see this is a very sensitive ministry, but also it claims it receives less funds. So bigger questions, but when we're looking at the budget allocations, these are some of the loopholes that we're supposed to cover up a little to turn this into a money economy, and also strengthening our sectors that we do believe are going to have a very huge statement in the economic recovery. Speaking of the economic recovery, we would need to specialize, but not specifically looking at one sector, but trying to see that we strengthen the other sectors. And in the long run, with the year of 2022-2023 and economic recovery, things will be going back to normal. This is Smart Means Business, and I'm Jerome Paul Sonko. Coming up after the break, we are heading to the international business news. With the international business news, that is the SMB across borders. Here, we take a look at the business news that are making headlines from the East African Community bloc. Not only that, we also look at the business news that are making headlines on the entire African continent. And not only the entire African continent, we also take a look at the business reports that are making headlines on the international scene. That is definitely here to make sure that we continuously drive your business. We are dedicated to be a morning kickstarter. After the break, we return with the SMB across borders.